So moving forward, let's talk about the fourth philosophy.
Surbi, as I said, many people actually struggle to exist. What I said in our earlier section, that they are born by default, they live their life by default, and they die by default. Surbi, one thing is for sure, our birth is always by default. I am sure you'll appreciate this fact. You have never chosen your parents. Your birth time was not chosen by you. That was also by default. When your birth is by default, there are many individuals who start thinking that their life also, which they are going to live, is going to be by default. Look at the aspect. Your birth is by default. You can't choose the place, you can't choose the parents, your parents, you can't choose the time of birth. The first step which you will take, Surbi, you must have taken, I'm sure there must be somebody in your family who might have helped you take your first step as well. Now I'm going to talk about 90% of the population, not those brilliant individuals and talented individuals. You never decided in which school you would go, right? It was only your parents that they decided. So your birth was by default, your first step was by default, your school which you went also was by default. And as I said, we are talking about 90% of the population, not those most talented people. So many of them, the kind of marks which they get in school, the first college which they get, the first stream which they get, they pounce on that. So your college which was been selected was also by default. Again, I am emphasizing we are only focusing on this 90% of the population. So college mein by default, the marks which you got into the college, your parents said, अब ये काम कर लो, इतना अभी कर लिए, अब बड़े हो गए हो, so now अपने पैरों पे खड़े हो जाओ. So whatever was the first job, you decided to take that first job. So your first job was also by default. Now there is a statistics in India, Surbi, that 93% of the people who get married are through arranged marriage. So even your marriage is by default. A person who has struggled in his college, struggled getting into his first company, and he gets into this habit of living his life by default. Imagine his progression in a corporate world also completely depends on his senior, because he can't carve his own path, he cannot justify for whatever the work which he's been doing, and that's the reason his promotions, his increments also are by default. A person, Surbi, who is born by default, whose first step in life is by default, getting into which school is by default, which college by default, getting married by default, whether getting an increment by default. A person who depends and his entire life, as I said, born by default, lived by default, eventually will die by default. And such individuals who go through this phase of born by default, lived by default and died by default, every single decisions of them in life are controlled by somebody else, Surbi. And a person whose entire life has been controlled by somebody else, he gets into something what I call as a dependency trap, a periphery beyond which we can't take our own decisions. And Surbi, throughout my professional life, I have seen so many people who do not love seeing their own reflections. I have asked this question to so many of my colleagues, and you will be shocked with the kind of responses which I get from them, or which I got from them. I had asked a group product manager a simple question: can you see yourself as a vice president of our organization in the next 5 years? So a group product manager has to be a marketing manager, the next elevation, then an GM of a company, then an AVP of a company, vice president of a company. That's the process. Right. So I had asked him, can you see, because I could see talent in him. I could see in his reflection that he can be our future vice president. So I asked him this question, that can you see yourself growing from a group product manager to a vice president of our organization in the next 5 years? The next question which I asked to the same person was, can you see yourself going along with your family, spending 5 nights at Taj Kolaba in a suite room, which will be not more than 2.5 or 3 lakhs, a spend which will be somewhere around 15 lakhs. Can you see yourself spending this probably 4 years down the line, 5 years down the line? Can you see traveling yourself in a first class in next 4 or 5 years? And that individual got so petrified. He said, sir, आप क्या मजाक कर रहे हो क्या? Look at me. आपको कौन से एंगल से आए के you can see me growing as a vice president in next 5 years? By the time of my retirement, अगर मैं GM भी बन जाऊं, तो बड़ी गनीमत है. Look at the thought process which many people actually breed within themselves. And that's the reason I said to you when we were discussing, Surbhi, that it is very important that you should love seeing your own reflection. Biggest reason for this struggle of existence, which I feel is fear of scale. Many people are not able to see themselves big in life, whether it is professionally or on their personal visions. And all those who struggle in their personal and professional life, what I call as born by default, lived by default and died by default, eventually fit themselves into ecosystem. And as I always say, a person who doesn't have his own vision, Surbhi, will always work for somebody else's vision. So Surbhi, I suggest that do not struggle to exist or get noticed. Your life would be worthless if you do not create your own persona, if you do not love what you see of yourself in the mirror.
So Charu sir, these are some of the very difficult questions that I'm sure most people would want to run away from. But I'm sure after listening to you today, it is very clear that these questions can actually be the right kind of triggers and would enable us to be more focused in our life. So moving forward, let's move towards the 5th philosophy.
Right, Surbhi. Surbhi, before we discuss about the 5th life philosophy of mine, I have seen most parents try searching their own non-accomplishment, what they want themselves to be, their unachieved self-desires in life to be brought up by their children. Good sense never prevails till the child never rises to their expectation. Mark my words, their expectations. The constant comparisons or competitiveness in the areas that were never their choice leads the individuals into black hole of impressing others. In this process, what we forget, Surbhi, to impress the person within us. And then you will find so many people who forget to impress themselves and continue to impress only others in life will continue to say to you, one such person will come to you and would say, "Aap purush nahi, aap to mahapurush ho." And never get into the trap of those kind of individuals who have spent their entire life into only impressing others. The constant comparisons or competitiveness in the areas that were never your choice actually leads into the black hole of impressing others. Surbhi, in this process, we forget to impress the person within us, as we discussed earlier. Never make this your way of life, or else your existence, your purpose in life is always in danger. Beware of all those who worship positions and undervalue the responsibilities which come along with the positions. Beware of the individuals who are these yes men. I call these individuals as yes men. You never know when they would say, yes, it was you who was responsible for my failure. If an individual changes an opinion about people around him frequently as per his convenience and requirement, it is a sign of his deep insecurity. God only knows when you are next as his or her scapegoat. Believe me or not, when I was discussing about this fifth philosophy, one thing which I never did in my life was trying to impress others in life. Impressing your seniors, impressing your colleagues, impressing your better halves. When your children grow up, you try to impress them. Because once you start getting into this black hole which we were discussing about, suddenly you will realize that one thing which you forgot was to impress yourself. And a person who never ever impresses himself is a person who would never rise to the higher positions or rise professionally or personally to the heights which we are talking about.
So thank you so much, Charu sir. This was an amazing conversation. We had some very, very interesting insights on this topic today.
Thanks a lot to you as well, Survi.
Welcome, sir. And with this, we come to the end of our podcast. Thank you so much, all of you, for tuning in. And folks, if you enjoyed this podcast, please make sure that you like this video and subscribe to our channel. Also, please let us know on the comments which philosophy you like the most, so you can discuss further with Charu sir on this on the comment section. You can also follow Charu sir on Instagram. You can also log on to his website, and we will see you soon with our next interesting episode. So stay tuned with us. Thank you.
And क्या बोलते हो? Rolling. I enjoyed this. True. And Sania, sorry.
That's okay, I'm not going to cut this. So Sania is sir's wife and he's like madly in love with her.
You're yeah.
So Sania ma'am is going to be very happy with this section of our episode, and we're not going to edit it.